Welcome back to my channel where we read scary stories and creepy legends. Bus 375. Bus 375 is a scary urban legend about a bus in Beijing that disappeared one cold November night, and it's supposed to be based on a true story. This is also known as the Midnight Bus or the Bus to Fragrant Hills. This story happened on November 14, 1995. In Beijing, China, at midnight, bus 375 pulled out at the Yuan Mingyun bus terminus. This was the last bus of the night and its destination was Fragrant Hill. On board were a driver and a female conductor. The night was bitterly cold and harsh wind was blowing. It stopped at South Gate next to the Summer Palace, and when the doors opened, four passengers got on: an old lady, a young couple, and a young man. The young couple sat at the front behind the driver, while the old lady and the young boy sat on the other side of the bus, beside the door. As the bus drove through the night, all they could hear was the drone of the engine. It was a quiet, remote area and no other vehicles were on the road. After a while, the driver spotted two shadows by the side of the road, waving at the bus. The driver stopped, and when the doors opened, three people got on. There were two men who were supporting a third man between them, holding it up by its shoulder. The man in the middle looked disheveled, and his head was bowed, so nobody can really see his face. All three of them were dressed in traditional Chinese robes from the Qing dynasty, and their faces were deathly pale. The other passengers on the bus were scared and glanced nervously at each other as the driver pulled off and continued down the road. The female conductor tried to calm everyone down by saying, "Don't be afraid. They could just be actors shooting a costume drama." But, you know, not everybody believed that. The old woman kept turning around and staring at the three passengers who were seated at the back of the bus. There was an eerie silence. None of the passengers said a word. All they could hear is the wind whistling outside. After the third or fourth stop, the young couple got off. The bus driver and the female conductor were chatting and laughing. The old woman suddenly jumped to her feet and hit the young man sitting in front of her. She was shouting and making a big fuss, telling everyone that he had stolen her purse. The young man stood up and started arguing with her, but the old woman grabbed him by his collar and demanded that the driver let them off the next stop, so she could bring him to the police station. The young man was speechless. When the bus stopped, the old lady dragged the young man out. They watched as the bus drove off into the night, and the old lady breathed a sigh of relief. "Where's the police station?" asked the young man. "There is no police station," the old woman replied. "I just saved your life." "What? How could you have saved my life?" the young man said, puzzled. "Those three people were ghosts," the old lady replied. "Ever since they got onto the bus, I had my doubts about them, so I kept looking back. It so happened that there was a wind blowing through the window, and I saw everything. I lifted up their robes, and I saw that they had no leg." The young man stared at the old lady in surprise. He started sweating. He couldn't say a word. The old lady called the police and told them what they had seen. The next day, bus 375 failed to report at the station. It had vanished along with the driver and the female conductor. The police searched the entire city, but they could not find any trace of it. They questioned the old woman and the young man, but they dismissed their story and decided that they were mentally ill. That night, the Beijing Evening News and the Beijing News reported on the story. The old woman and the young man were both interviewed live on TV. 2 days later, the police eventually found the missing bus. It was submerged in the Meon Reservoir, about 100 kilometers from Fragrant Hill. Inside the bus, they discovered three badly decomposed bodies: the bus driver and the female conductor, and an unidentified man. There were a number of other mysteries surrounding the case. The bus did not have enough gas to drive all the way to Meon Reservoir, and when the police opened the petrol tank, they found it filled with blood. Even though the bodies were found only 2 days after they disappeared, they were badly decomposed. An I can never say this word. Autopsy confirmed that there had been no intentional meddling with the body. How could have they decomposed so quickly? The police did a strict inspection of all security cameras tapes on each entrance leading to the Meon Reservoir, but the bus wasn't seen in any of them. In fact, they found nothing out of the ordinary whatsoever. What could the bus How could the bus get there without being seen? To this date, it remains an unsolved mystery. Thank you so much for listening, and I really do appreciate the views. And make sure you subscribe, or I'll be sending my little friends after you too.
Selamat kembali kepada channel saya di mana kita menceritakan cerita-cerita seram dan legenda yang lebih menakutkan. Cerita ni adalah daripada seorang pelajar yang mengambil kerja sebagai cleaner part-time selepas SPM. Namanya adalah Abu. Untuk membedekkan cerita ni, Abu kena kerja shift malam. Waktu tu kebanyakan pekerja-pekerja office sudah pulang ke rumah. Disebabkan Abu cleaner baru, dia dilantik oleh seorang senior yang bernama Pak Raj, yang jarak umur mereka adalah di dalam lingkungan 20 ke 25 tahun juga. Pak Raj suruh Abu bersihkan tandas lelaki di tingkat bawah tanah dulu, sebab tingkat di atas selalunya dibersihkan oleh cleaner shift siang. Bagi Abu tak kisahlah, sebab waktu malam ni tak ramai orang, sebab tu senang juga dia nak buat kerja dia. Sebab Abu bersihkan tandas lelaki, tiba-tiba terdengar seorang menjerit. Terkejut juga Abu sebab sudah lewat malam dan bukannya ada orang juga dekat office. Dia keluar daripada tandas lelaki dan berjalan ke koridor. Semasa berjalan, Abu terdengar suara seorang menangis, macam suara perempuan. Dia memasang telinga mencari di mana suara tu. Cari, dia yakin suara tu datang daripada tandas perempuan. Dia ketuk pintu tandas sebelum masuk, tanya ada sesiapa tak, tapi tak ada jawapan. Tapi suara tangisan tu semakin kuat. Sebab risau, dia pun membuat keputusan untuk masuk ke dalam. Ketika tu, dia nampak seorang bayang di cubicle di tengah. Memang ketiga-tiga cubicle di dalam tandas tu tutup separuh sahaja. Dia perlahan-lahan tolak cubicle di pintu pertama. Tak ada sesiapa. Abu terdengar sesuatu jatuh di kubikel sebelah dia. Walaupun dia cuba beranikan diri pergi kubikel sebelah. Dia tolak pintunya pelan-pelan. Terkejut Abu dibuatnya bila Abu melihat seorang wanita terbaring di dalam kubikel tu. Dia lihat lehernya diikat dengan tali yang panjang. Dia kelihatan mengelupar seperti nyawa-nyawa ikan. Abu lihat ke atas siling ada ikatan tali yang sudah terputus. Dia syak perempuan ni cuba bunuh diri. Walaupun dia kaku seketika, dia cuba pelan-pelan menarik perempuan tu keluar daripada kubikel. Dia baringkan perempuan tersebut di atas lantai. Daripada baju yang dia pakai, dia dah agak tak perempuan ni pekerja di bangunan ni. Dia tengok matanya sudah naik ke atas. Dia cuba periksa nadinya, masih ada. Tapi di dalam keadaan yang tidak sedar. Mungkin Abu sempat selamatkan dia. Dia terfikir. Dia tekan-tekan dada dia dan cuba memberi pernafasan dari mulut ke mulut. Akibat dari pergantungan tu, dia mungkin kekurangan oksigen yang diperlukan untuk sampai ke otaknya. Setelah beberapa kali mencuba, dia masih tak bagi apa-apa respons yang positif. Ketika tu, dia teringat ada emergency box dalam pejabat Pak Raj. Mungkin ada bantuan pernafasan ke apa ke. Tanpa membuang masa, dia berlari ke pejabat Pak Raj. Setelah sampai je, dia mencari box tu. Kau buat apa tu? Tangan luka ke apa ni? Terkejut bila Pak Raj punya suara tiba-tiba memanggil Abu. Pak Raj, ada orang cuba bunuh diri lah kat tandas bawah. Kau biar betul, siapa nak bunuh diri? Tak tahulah Pak Raj, dia cuba gantung diri dalam tandas perempuan. Dia tengah nyaw-nyawikan tu, kalau lambat nanti tak sempat pula. Pak Raj dengan Abu mengambil emergency box tu dan terus pergi ke tandas tingkat bawah. Apabila sahaja sampai di luar tandas tu, Abu perasan yang pintu tandas tu terbuka luas. Setahu Abu, dia sudah tutup pintu tu sebelum pergi mengambil Pak Raj supaya orang lain tak terlihat. Abu dengan Pak Raj masuk ke dalam. Luruh jantung Abu dibuatnya bila melihat tiada sesiapa di dalam tandas perempuan tu. Abu lihat kembali ke arah tandas tersebut. Memang betul. Memang tandas ni. Mana orang yang kau cakap tadi tu? Tanya Pak Raj. Kat sini. Saya tinggalkan kat sini. Betul ke ni? Jangan nak tipu Pak Raj soal. Betul, saya sempat lagi bagi CPR. Mana tahu mungkin saya selamatkan dia ke ataupun dia dah keluar daripada tandas ni ke. Okey. Jom kita jumpa Lim. Kita pergi tengok CCTV, okey? Pak Raj bawa Abu pergi ke bilik CCTV untuk memastikan teori tersebut betul. Sampai sahaja di bilik CCTV, dia terjumpa dengan Lim yang jaga bilik tu. Pak Raj meminta Lim untuk memainkan balik rakaman CCTV di tingkat bawah. Visual yang ditunjukkan dalam koridor yang Abu lalui semasa membuat kerja. Setelah mendapat masa, Abu masuk ke dalam tandas perempuan tu. Abu dapat lihat yang diri Abu sendiri keluar daripada tandas berlari-lari menuju ke Pak Raj. Abu menerus memerhatikan rakaman tersebut. Abu dapat lihat sebelum Abu keluar memang Abu menutup pintu tandas tu. Namun dalam beberapa minit Abu masih tak nampak apa-apa perubahan. Tiba-tiba mata Abu terperasan sesuatu. Pintu tandas perempuan tu terbuka perlahan-lahan. Namun tiada sesiapa yang keluar pada waktu tu. Lama-lama rakaman tu menunjukkan yang Abu membawa Pak Raj ke tandas tersebut. Ketika tu bulu roma Abu memang meremang. Abu melihat Pak Raj dengan Lim senyum sahaja. Sudahlah, kau balik rumah dulu. Biar pakcik settlekan tingkat ni, okey? Pak Raj kata. Aku memang tak faham apa yang tengah jadi. Abu cakap balik. Lim hanya senyum je dalam ketika waktu ni. Tapi Abu ikut je apa yang Pak Raj cakap dan terus balik ke rumah. Keesokan hari Abu demam 3 hari berturut-turut. Abu bagi tahu kat mak bapak dia apa yang berlaku dan bapak dia memang pergi melawat Pak Raj dan mengatakan yang bangunan tu memang sangat keras. Selepas beberapa hari kejadian tersebut, Abu pun sudah berhentikan kerja kerana tak sanggup nak pergi balik ke bangunan tu kan. Itulah cerita Abu dan kerja part time dia sebagai seorang cleaner. Kalau anda pernah dengar cerita-cerita seperti ini, hantarlah kat saya supaya saya pun boleh membacakan cerita awak di dalam channel saya ya. Kalau ada apa-apa komen yang anda rasa yang boleh saya membetulkan cara saya menceritakan cerita-cerita seram saya, tolong hantar juga.
Welcome back to my channel where we read scary stories and creepy legends. It was the night before Deepavali and I wasn't exactly excited. It was COVID and due to the pandemic's regulation, I was not able to meet my parents who were a few states away from me. I hid back to bed quite early that night and my husband was still outside to get some errands done for his job. Not long after, I was wakened by the sound of my husband coughing profusely. I had guessed that he probably came back home somewhere in the middle of the night. My room was dark, with the only source of light being the moonlight and also the lights from the street that came through the window. I frowned looking at the curtains wide open again. I had told Paul many times before to make sure that the curtains are closed before he came to bed. I still had my body facing the window. I took a quick glance and noticed that Paul's curled up body was in the blanket right next to me. I glanced at the time on my alarm clock. It was 3:10 a.m. I tried looking for my phone. It usually would be right by my side, but it wasn't there. My husband had a habit of putting my phone and also his somewhere in the living hall to charge before sleeping, only because he's afraid of the radiation. It's something. It was sweet that he cared so much, but yeah, whatever. Lights from the window kinda irritated me too much. Pal, Pal, I called out to wake him up. I even tried kicking his leg, but was in deep sleep. He didn't budge. Fine, I'll do it myself. I got up to close the curtains. The floor was very cold, and I noticed something outside in the right outside of my house. Yeah, it was muddy footprints. I don't know if it rained or something, but they were legit muddy footprints leading into my house. I really didn't know what to think of it at that time, but I just thought that maybe it was Paul's. Whatever. I shut the curtains tight and ran back to the warmth of my own blanket. I got into a comfortable position, and as I closed my eyes and my mind relaxed, I heard a very faint noise. A noise that was coming from the living hall. A noise that shouldn't have alarmed me, but it did. And it didn't stop. It continued for a while, and it was still just a noise that I couldn't place. I couldn't remember where I've heard this before. I know I've heard this noise before, but where? I thought to myself that night. However, it didn't take me long to remember. Terror filled my mind as I identified the opening my front door. Pal, someone's here. I called out to my husband as I shook him vigorously. The footsteps of the intruder got closer and closer, but my husband was still asleep. You're pissed drunk, aren't you? Fuck's sake, Pal. The footstep just grew louder. I hid into my blanket with just enough space right below my eyes so I can see what was going on. A tall, dark figure entered the room. It was definitely a man. I reached out to my husband's hand just to give out one final jerk, hoping to wake him up. But I couldn't find his hand. The intruder switched on the light. Babe? Paul asked me, confused. I was still hiding inside the blanket like a frightened child. Are you okay? He asked, concerned. I looked to my right. There was no one there. Thank you so much for listening, and also di balik artikel to all of my friends out there who is actually celebrating this joyous occasion. Please be safe and don't forget to subscribe.
Welcome back to my channel where I read scary stories and creepier legends. Elevator. Sia waved goodbye to her friend R as she walked towards the elevator from R's apartment. The assignment took longer than either of them expected, and now it was close to 2 a.m. I love you. Be careful, R yelled at Sia as she smiled. She could hear R going into the apartment and locking the doors. A slight uneasiness came over Sia as she stopped in front of the elevator, waiting in silence of the night. Sia glanced back to her phone and scrolled down her Instagram feed. It was a cold night, and the silence of the night was not comforting. She had expected the old apartment complex to be more busier, but tonight she couldn't even hear the small bugs and animals' usual songs of night. Her elevator was finally here. She got in, still focused on her phone, as she pressed the button to the ground floor, where she had parked her car. She smiled at her phone, looking at funny videos, trying to distract herself from the eerie ambiance the night had. She looked up to the monitor that points out the floor they were in. It didn't show G, like what she had expected, but the number 4, a number that her superstitious aunt had always reminded her to avoid. Fuck, she whispered under her breath. She hit the emergency button to get help. Thankfully, a man from the other end assured her that he will be able to get the elevator working soon. She sighed relief and sat on one of the corners of the elevator, texting her friend of her current unfortunate situation. Sia looked up again to the monitor, relieved that the elevator was finally working. The elevator wasn't moving, however. It was still stuck on the 4th floor. Confused, she decided to hit the emergency button one more time. The man answered immediately. "Hi, can I help you?" he asked. "Yeah, I just told you I'm stuck here, remember?" She answered, annoyed that she had to explain her situation again, especially seeing how frightening the entire thing was. The man again assured her that she would be all right and he would get things sorted out as soon as he could. Just as she finished talking to the man, her friend called her. "Hey, are you okay?" R asked in a nervous tone. The elevator bell rang a few more times, annoying Sia and R on the phone. "What is that?" R asked, irritated. "The elevator." "Are you sure? I don't remember it sounding like that," her friend said, but decided not to dwell on it. R ended the call reassuring her that she would get the security guard to help her. Before Sia could even tell her anything, she ended the call. After a few more minutes passed, she pressed the emergency button one more time, to the same man answering. "Sir, is everything okay?" she asked, agitated at this point. "Give me a moment to work," he answered back, rather upset at that tone. "I'm sorry, I'm just sitting here all alone." "What do you mean? I've been right behind you the whole time." Thank you so much for listening. This is the part 1 of the two-part story of The Elevator. Please subscribe so you do not miss any notification from my channel, and do not forget to like and comment if you have any, ways that I can make this channel a bit more better. Hey guys, welcome to my channel where we read scary stories and creepy legends. So today we're going to be reading a few of my favorite Malaysian urban legends. The first one will be about the mysterious taxi passenger. The story is often told about a taxi driver who was working the late night shift. As he drove through the quiet city roads, the dashboard clock slowly counted down to midnight. Suddenly, he saw a beautiful young woman standing at the corner of the traffic light junction. She had this long black hair and was dressed in a flowing white dress. He stopped his cab and asked if she needed a ride. The young lady turned slowly to stare at him, then she got into the cab without saying a word. As soon as she, as soon as she entered the car, the taxi driver was hit with a strong scent of jasmine flower. For those who are not aware of this, it is rumored that if you do smell jasmine flowers out of, nowhere, usually it means that an entity is close by. So, as usual, he asked her where she needed to go. The girl simply handed him a piece of paper. On it was a number and the name of a road. The taxi driver was not familiar with this location and asked the girl if she could direct him. She just nodded silently. However, the young lady did not say a single word throughout the ride, only nodding her head to indicate when the taxi driver had taken the correct course. At last, they found the road, which was situated well away from the city center. It was narrow, just enough for one car to pass, and dark, as there was no working streetlights. This was enough for the taxi driver to feel all kind of ways deep down his belly. It was almost midnight by the time they actually reached to this area, and as soon as the taxi driver inched forward carefully, he tried to make out the address of the houses from left to right. To his growing horror, there were no houses in sight, just endless rows of gravestones. He broke in a cold sweat and the back of his neck prickled. Not daring to look into his rear mirror now, he nervously asked the young lady if this was really where she wanted to go. There was no answer from her. As he slowly guided his cab through the darkness, he desperately hoped that there was a house somewhere ahead where this girl lived. At last, he felt a light tap on his shoulder. He dared not to turn around, but simply stopped the car. He heard the rustle of money and felt the girl's hand him the cash. He took the money and, in a shaking, quivering manner, and stuck it in a ashtray compartment without counting it. He hid back home right after he heard the rear door open and close. He sped so fast down the dark road that he did not even realize what time it was when he got back home. The next morning, he just wanted to check if he really did have the money. He wanted to know if this was just a dream or did it really happen. And when he opened his ashtray compartment, to his surprise, it was Chinese hell notes. He threw it out of the cab and just never, looked back. Later, he found out that the girl had died the week before in a horrible accident at the very junction he had picked her up from. It was a hit and run and happened around midnight. The driver was never really caught. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked that video, please subscribe, and if you don't, comment below on how I can make it better. Either way, don't forget to subscribe or I'll be sending my scary friends after you.
Have you ever waken up unable to move? Some people will tell you that you're suffering from sleep paralysis if this happened to you. Sleep paralysis is one of those things that happens to everyone, and yet no one can really explain why. The only thing known is that it happens before or after sleep, and the only thing you can actually do is wait it out. In Thailand, however, many believe that sleep paralysis has a much more haunting explanation
Today we will be talking about PM. PM sits on your chest while you're asleep. Thailanders also blame the ghost for having nightmares and troubled sleep. Many even believe that the spirit can kill you in your sleep. It may sound ridiculous to people who have never experienced this, but not being able to move is having something sit on your chest. It's just the worst thing ever. Of course, you have nothing to worry about if you're a woman. PM only attacks men. You can always wear lipstick on before you sleep if you're a guy, but PM might just be able to see you through your beard. Thank you so much for listening, and let's just pray that you don't get visited by PM tonight. Have you ever waken up unable to move? Some people will tell you that you're suffering from sleep paralysis if this happened to you. Sleep paralysis is one of those things that happens to everyone, and yet no one can really explain why. The only thing known is that it happens before or after sleep, and the only thing you can actually do is wait it out. In Thailand, however, many believe that sleep paralysis has a much more haunting explanation. Today, we will be talking about PM. PM sits on your chest while you're asleep. Thailanders also blame the ghost for having nightmares and troubled sleep. Many even believe that the spirit can kill you in your sleep. It may sound ridiculous to people who have never experienced this, but not being able to move is having something sit on your chest. It's just the worst thing ever. Of course, you have nothing to worry about if you're a woman. PM only attacks men. You can always wear lipstick on before you sleep if you're a guy, but PM might just be able to see you through your beard. Thank you so much for listening, and let's just pray that you don't get visited by PM tonight.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel where we read scary stories and creepy legends. The legend we will be reading today is Purple Mirror, which is an urban legend from Japan about a cursed wood. If you are under the age of 20 years old, I would really suggest you to not listen to the story because in this story there is a phrase that I will be saying over again and again. And if you do still remember this phrase by the age of 20, you will die. Years ago, there was a Japanese girl who was very vain and spent all of her time staring at a reflection in a mirror. It had given to her as a present by her mother, and the girl cherished it more than anything. It was her most prized possession. The girl was desperate to be beautiful and developed anorexia, starving herself to the point of where she was painfully thin. As time went on, her health became worse and worse, and no matter how pale and gaunt she looked, when she gazed into the mirror, she saw herself as beautiful. One day, she wanted to decorate the mirror, so she painted it with purple. When she looked into the glass, she was disgusted. She no longer saw herself as beautiful, she saw herself as what she really looked like, a pale, thin, haggard mess with bones protruding through her leathery skin. Horrified, she smashed the mirror to pieces, but afterwards she had regretted doing so. On her 20th birthday, the girl was in the middle of making preparation for her coming of age party when she was hit by a car and killed. As she died, her last word on her lips were purple mirror, purple mirror, purple mirror. After the funeral, when her parents searched her room, they could not find the purple mirror. Rumors about the girl spread throughout Japan.
After her funeral, some young people were found dead under mysterious circumstances. All of them died on their 20th birthday, but no cause of death was ever found. But in each case, shards of purple glass were found in their bedroom. Ever since that day, the word purple mirror have been cursed, and it is believed that anybody who still remembers the phrase by the age of 20 will die. It is very important that you forget that you ever heard the word purple mirror. Just try and get the whole concept of a purple mirror out of your mind. Whatever you do, please get those words out of your brain. Your life depends on it. Thank you so much for listening to this week's story. If you do have any comments on how I can improve, do comment it down below. And if you like the video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you don't, still subscribe. Welcome back to my channel where we read scary stories and creepy legends. Thai Woman. The Thai Woman is a creepy story about a young couple who went on a trip together and noticed something really strange in their photos. A young man decided to go on a holiday with his girlfriend. She told him that she wanted to go somewhere hot and sunny, so he booked 2 tickets to Thailand. They spent 2 weeks touring the country and had a wonderful time together. They met a lot of friendly local people who visited many exotic tourist attraction. In Bangkok, they saw the Grand Palace and a variety of interesting Buddhist temple. They relaxed on the beautiful sandy beaches of Phuket and swam in the crystal blue ocean. In Chiang Mai, they went shopping in the night bazaar and then danced till dawn at a number of bars and nightclubs. The holiday brought the couple closer together, and they both were impressed by the charms of Thai culture. When they had returned home, their digital camera was full of photos that they had taken during the trip. After a few days, the young man was looking through the photo, remembering all the good times that they had shared. All of a sudden, he noticed that in several of the pictures of his girlfriend that had taken of them, there was a strange woman standing in the background. She had a long, black hair and wore a flowing white gown. She was standing too far away to make out her face. The man decided to show the picture to his girlfriend. "Do you remember this woman?" he asked. "No, I don't," she replied. "I thought you were alone when I took this picture." After examining the pictures more closely, they realized that the strange Thai woman was lurking in the background of several photos they had taken in different cities. It was as if she had been following them as they toured the country. The young man went through the rest of the photo that they had taken, and when he came to the last one, a chill ran down his spine. It was a woman. It was the picture of him standing in the middle of a busy street in Chiang Mai. The strange woman had standing directly behind him, peering over his shoulder. This time, her face was clearly visible. Her skin was deadly pale, and she didn't have any eyes. He found all of this extremely unsettling and wanted to know who this weird Thai lady was and why he had been followed by her. He decided to visit a psychic to get the bottom of this. His girlfriend made an appointment with the psychic for him, and he had printed out a photograph in which the woman's face was visible. The next day, when he visited the psychic office, he sat down on his sofa opposite to her and took the photograph off of her pocket. Pointing to the pale lady in the picture, he asked, "Can you tell me anything about this woman?" The psychic took the photograph and examined it closely. And then she said, "Yes, I can. She's standing right behind you now." Welcome back to my channel where we read scary stories and creepy legends. Following the success that I got on one of my videos regarding on the possession of
Clarita, I thought let's do another video from Philippines as well. And this will be the story of Teresita Basa. On the night of 21st February 1977, the firefighters responded to a call and arrived at a Chicago apartment to put out a fire. They responded that the fire was confined to the room number 15B of a certain Teresitabasa. When they went inside to the room and the fire was under control, they were welcomed by a terrifying discovery: the burnt, unclothed body of Teresita Basa covered up by a mattress. Investigators who arrived at the scene suspected that it was a case of rape/murder. Other than that, a note that read, "Get tickets for AS," written on the victim herself. There were no other clues that would lead to the culprit. To unravel the mystery of the crime, they had to dig deeper into the life of Basa and figure out who A.S. was. Teresita was a native of Dumaguete City in the Philippines, where she is now buried. After graduating from Assumption College in Manila, she immigrated to US in the mid 1960s. Before her death, she worked as a respiratory therapist. Wait, I need to say that again. Respiratory therapist at the now closed Edgewater Hospital in Chicago. As for the real identity of A.S., Detective Joe Stachula had waited a couple of months before getting a lead. Finally, he was asked by the Evanston police to contact a certain Dr. Jose Chua to get more information on Basa's case. Dr. Chua and his wife Remy, both Filipinos, were hesitant at first but later agreed to share their story after Detective Stachula assured that he's open to anything. Dr. Chua claimed that his wife would go into a trance-like state and become possessed by a spirit. The spirit introduced herself as Teresita Basa and went as far as naming her murderer, Alan Showery, as well as his specific proof like the jewelry that was stolen from her and the names and the phone number of relatives that could identify that proof. All this led to the arrest of Alan Showery, an orderly working in the same hospital as the victim and Dr. Chua's wife. The jewelry that Alan gave to his girlfriend was positively identified as belonging to Basa, prompting the suspect to give a full confession. Alan ended up later pleading guilty and was sentenced to imprisonment but eventually released in 1983 after less than 5 years of serving this sentence. Thank you so much for listening. And if you like that, please subscribe. And if you did not like that, still subscribe. Welcome back to my channel where I read scary stories and creepier legends. The scariest picture on the internet is an urban legend about a strange painting of a beautiful young Asian girl who committed suicide. The painting is said to be cursed, and if you stare at it long enough, the image will change and her face will become hideous and monstrous. According to the lead, this is a picture of a teenage girl who lived in a country in Southeast Asia. Her boyfriend was an artist and he painted a portrait of her. The girl was the target of bullying at school. She was of a very fragile nature and she reached a point where she just couldn't take any of the bullying anymore and then committed suicide. When her boyfriend heard the news of her death, he was so anguished that he finished the painting, sent a copy of the painting to all the people who bullied her, and then jumped to his own death. One of the bullies who received the picture in the email looked at the picture and believed that he might have gone crazy. He claimed that he felt a rotting hand grasp his face, and he was found the very next day hiding in a neighbor's backyard, shouting, "She came, she came." He became ill and was confined to bed. Doctors could not figure what was wrong with him, and 3 months later, he died. Since then, the pictures has been circulating on the internet, and people believe that strange things happen when you stare at this painting too long. People find themselves drawn in or hypnotized by a vivid blue eyes. An artist who became obsessed with the painting was later found dead in his own home. He had hung himself. Many people say if you stare into her eyes long enough, her face will change into something frightening. Others say that staring into her eyes will summon her ghost. They say it is best to have a friend with you when you're viewing the picture to make sure that you don't have an accident or do something really stupid, like taking your own life.
I started work back in May at a shopping mall in Johor Bahru, Malaysia. The name isn't important, especially after what I found out. I wouldn't want any of you to go through what I did. I applied online after saying that it had a grand opening soon. I got an email not even 10 minutes later asking if I'd be available for an interview. The next day, I had gotten the job as a receptionist not long after sitting down with the manager. The next few days went smoothly. The grand opening was a busy time, but I always worked with the same people, so I got their names down pretty easily. A lot of the customers were practically the same people again and again. It was a small town, so it is pretty understandable. Same people at the same time with same topics. One night I walked to the food court where I and a few other of our colleagues always sat in and heard them talking about a prison break in Malacca. They had talked about it the night before too. I remember thinking about how I hadn't heard anything about prisoners breaking out, but I shrugged it out. I was never up to date on the news anyway. The grand opening lasted for a week, but the same activities were played over and over again. It somehow did not fail to get the same exciting response every time from customers. That's marketing for you, I guess. The first time I really noticed how strange the place seemed was when customers came by to ask for directions. This lady that I probably see every day comes by asking where H&M is. At first, I just found it funny. Then I realized this woman almost never remembers me the very next day. Almost every day at 3 p.m., she will walk up to me and ask where this place was. I told my manager that this was odd. He told me to ignore it, so I did. By now, I must have worked there for a week when I got a call from my current workplace to come for an interview. I did go in and pretty much got the job. The interviewer asked if I was working anywhere else and if I needed to give a grace period. I obviously nodded, saying that this shopping mall is where I worked at. I guess he thought it was funny or something because he looked puzzled and said, "Guess no grace period then. See you on Monday?" I obliged, saying that my boss already knew that I was actively looking for another job and he wouldn't have a problem, since there was an older lady who hardly ever speaks to me working there too. I called my manager to tell him this, but he did not pick up my calls. So I decided to Google up if there's any other number for me to call in, and there is where I found it. I found multiple articles. 4 years ago, the place that I worked at practically destroyed itself. It was built on top of muddy land, which sank and took almost 157 people who were there on its grand opening. Every victim sank, or at least the police guessed they did, since no bodies were ever found. In fact, nothing has ever been recovered Phones, wallets, clothings, all gone. I am petrified to know this even till now. I occasionally get texts from my ex manager from the shopping mall asking why I am not coming to work. Welcome back to my channel where we read scary stories and creepier legends. The Twitter killer Takahiro Shirashi. By now, most of us know the name Takahiro Shirashi. He was found guilty by the Tokyo District Court for the murder of 8 women and 1 man. Shirashi also robbed and sexually assaulted the 8 women he had murdered, some of whom were minors. On December 15, 2020, he was finally given the death sentence by the Tokyo District Court. While capital punishment is relatively rare in Japan, the Tokyo District Court ruled that the extreme seriousness of his crimes committed by Takahiro Shirashi definitely would deserve the death penalty. So, how did the notorious killer get his start? Shirashi used Twitter to lure women who shared on the website that they wanted to kill themselves. He told them that he could help them by using his Twitter handle at Hanging Pro to communicate with them. But once in his apartment, Shirashi strangled them. Afterwards, Shirashi dismembered their bodies and stored the body parts throughout the apartment. The man he killed was murdered to conceal the death of his first victim. His first victim was a 21-year-old woman whom he had met in a park along with her male acquaintance. He ended up borrowing 4.5K from her to rent out an apartment in Zama, which was southwest of Tokyo. Shirashi admitted that he strangled her only to avoid paying her back and later killed her male friend whom he confided with about the woman's disappearance. He said that he had never been interested in suicide but had used it in a way to lure more victims in. He found people who had tweeted under the hashtag I want to die and he found it very easy to convince them. Police tracked him down after the brother of one of his victims found messages from Shirashi in the victim's Twitter account and informed police. The way his murders had been discovered was the more gruesome part, if not devastating part of this entire video. His last victim, whose name is concealed due to privacy, had been suffering from mental illness. Despite her family's effort in helping her, she had dark thoughts. She must have been ecstatic when she found Jirashi's tweet and proceeded to contact him via Twitter. After several days of communication, she finally agreed to meet him in real life so he can help her to commit suicide. The very first day of her disappearance, the entire family was worried as they were all well aware of her mental state. Her brother thankfully was able to hack into his sister's Twitter and found the messages between her and Shirashi. The brother wasted no time in meeting Shirashi. Once at his apartment, the brother asked where his sister was. Shirashi's reaction to the question wasn't what the brother had expected. Shirashi had just gestured into his apartment, however, there was nobody inside. The brother had already done the smart thing by contacting the police before even attempting to meet Shirashi. When the police arrived, they found body parts stored in Shirashi's freezer and other containers. Shirashi told the police that he had tweeted about suicide and exchanged messages with several women, trying to coax them into his apartment. 8 of the victims were female, including aged between 15 to 17. This was definitely a devastating incident, not only to the victims and their families, but also all of us suffering from mental illness. The thought of someone using our own issues and problems to gain profit like this is despicable. I want to remind everyone listening that no matter how difficult things are, it is going to get better. And with that, I would also like to relay my condolences to the victims and their families involved. The others. I wasn't gifted with my sister Lisa's ability
or Larry's talent. For all my 16 years of life, I have been cynical of these powers. I did not hate them or love them any less, but I simply had a harder time believing them compared to how my parents were ready to believe them. As a high schooler, most of my problems were between me wanting a girlfriend and trying to figure out why my track team's coach, Mr. Adam, as an ass that won't quit. Of course, my problems seemed rather small compared to my other younger sibling, and I was constantly forced to push my problems away. Lisa and Larry were both 5 years old, and my Nana always mentioned that maybe they can see the others because they are still pure. She also believed our family were always gifted with the eye, but I've been a 5 year old before, and I have never seen the others. What I have seen and enjoyed is the intention that you get from adults when you act out or draw a nice picture of a bird. I knew that these two were doing this. They were acting out in order to gain a bit of attention. It was just a bit more complicated. Rather than throwing an elaborate tantrum, they just told elaborate lies on how they can see the dead. Quite smart, really, which is why I cannot be mad at them. But one night, things got out of hand. I played along for a couple of times, but it got really annoying after a while. The night started as how any of my nights would usually. I brushed my teeth and I washed my face, put on a pair of ripped jeans and a shirt that has the band print on it. It was Adam's favorite band, and I couldn't wait for him to tear it open tonight. I suddenly heard a squeaky scream from the room next door as my left leg was already out of the window. It sounded like Lisa calling for Dad. Sighing, I got back in and wore my nightrobe. I opened the door to the room next to me to see a frightened Lisa and a surprised Larry. You see, Larry couldn't see the others, he only draws them. I'm not sure how that even works. I went to Lisa and sat next to her. What's wrong? I entertained her with the attention. The tall man, she's here, she answered with a frightened expression glooming over her face. I looked over to Larry. Why are you awake then? I asked him, expecting a similar answer. She woke me up, he answered, rubbing his eyes. Okay, Lisa, we've gone through this before. If it's a man, we use he. I started with my grammar lesson. Aren't you listening to me? The scary man, he's here, she continued as she slowly sunk into her blanket. I want daddy. Look, Lisa, we have gone through this before. Mom is really tired, and Dad. I was interrupted with a pair of footsteps rushing into the room. It was my dad, frantically running into the room, asking what's wrong. Daddy, the man, he's here, Lisa said, getting out of the bed and running to hug him. My dad carried her back into the bed and tucked her in as I stood beside her bed looking at him, trying to consolidate my sister. Don't worry, baby girl. I know he's scary, but he's just a part of your imagination. You'll be fine, he said, kissing her forehead. Larry had already tucked himself in the blanket, waiting for my dad to kiss his forehead. He patted me on my back. Thanks, boy. I think they just had a bad dream, he said as he closed their room door and we both walked out. I nodded in silence. Now go to bed, he said, smiling. I went straight to my parents' room and slept in the couch in their room all the way till morning. My mom woke up surprised to see me squeezing my 5'8" body on the couch. We went to the kitchen and she made me pancakes. It was a form of bribery, I think, so I would start talking. I like Dad's pancakes better. He always tries to make them into some kind of odd shape, and we had to guess what it is. I looked at the pancakes my mom placed in front of me. My mom sat next to me and asked, "Why were you sleeping in that uncomfortable couch?" I just didn't know how to tell her that I saw my dad, who died in a car crash a month ago, telling my sister that there's no such thing as ghosts. Welcome back to my channel where we read scary stories and creepy legends. I had known the guy a little because he had worked with my friend at the bar that I used to go. He seemed cool and he was actually very cute. So when I saw him on Tinder, I was very excited. The guy, who we will call Adam, was pretty normal on the surface. After talking to him on Tinder itself, we exchanged numbers. After that, we spoke on the phone for a few days and even exchanged cute selfies. I decided to initiate a date. We went out on a date, and as the night continued, he asked if I would mind if we could just hang out at a local park because we had been at a super busy, loud bar that actually had a band playing. It just felt like we couldn't even talk. I was 20 and somehow naive back then, so I agreed to it. The park was right in the middle of a busy city, so it wasn't exactly dark. We were still inside his car, parked in front of the park. As we were talking, he leans in to kiss me, and I look around, realizing that it has gotten really dark. I'm in heaven because at this point he hasn't given me any reason to think he's a creeper. We had a great night. He was charming, was funny. We had tons in common. Then, after our first kiss, he gets this creepy grin. He looks out the window of the car and then says to me, "I'm taking you in those woods and we're gonna have a really good time." I kind of laughed because I thought he was making a joke, but he looked really serious. That's when I got really, really nervous. I tell him I'd rather just stay in the car. He gets weird and angry, and it was as if I was speaking to two different people. "Why can't we go into the woods? I promise I won't rape or kill you, okay?" By now, he's trying to laugh it off, but I gotten a little too creeped out. I try to play it off like I'm not ready to run away, but inside I so am. I should have been more creeped out by this back then, but like I said, I was a bit more naive. It creeps me out till now as I'm like, recounting and writing about it. He looks at me again and leans back into his seat and begins to start fake whining. "Oh, come on, let me just take you into the woods. It'll be fun." I'm having none of this and I start getting really mad. I tell him I'm not ready for whatever he's planning and I want to go home. He refused. I was very nervous at this time. I always carried my pepper spray, but this one time that I really do need it, I do not have it. I told him to surprise me. I asked him to clean up a place in the woods and maybe come and get me again with blindfolded or something, so I would get excited about what we're gonna do. He wasn't opposed to the idea, which was creepier for me. As he got down and vanished to the woods in front of me, I took this chance to grab my purse and ran off to the nearest car or person I could see. My initial thought was to just take his car and drive off, but he was smart enough to take his keys with him. I wasn't so sure how long it probably took him to come back or realize that I was not there anymore, but I had already met a female jogger who agreed to book a ride for me. She even waited until I got into the car. which made me feel so much at ease. My suspicions of Adam only got confirmed years after. Like I mentioned, he was too creepy and I just never contacted him. I uninstalled the app and I practically moved to a different country. But yeah, so it was the same close friend that I had who was working with Adam who brought up this awful news to me. Adam apparently had locked up a girl in his house for months until the girl finally escaped. He had gone straight to the cop and now he was a wanted criminal. I thanked my lucky stars that I did not go into the woods with him that night, but sometimes when I look out of my window to the street across from my place, especially on a rainy night like this, I swear I still see him standing outside waiting for me. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked that video, please subscribe. And if you don't, comment below on how I can make it better. Either way, don't forget to subscribe or I'll be sending my scary friends after you.